Good morning. Welcome to the worship service of the First Unitarian Church of Hobart. My name is Barb Langle, and I participate in the life of the church by serving on the Board of Trustees, among other things. We are a religious community of people with diverse beliefs and shared values. Our diverse beliefs are expressed in our 6 sources, and our shared values are expressed in our 7 principles. Both can be found online at uua.org. Together, we strive to grow spiritually, build community, and live our values in the world. Have everybody's attention? I have a few announcements. We are having our semi-annual rummage sale on Friday and Saturday, October 7th and 8th. So start cleaning out your closets, basements, garages, and more. And you could bring any donations any Sunday until then, or during the week of October 3rd from 10 to 2. Please think about how you can participate in the community by attending the ministry fair after service today. Grab something to eat and check out the possibilities. There are all levels of participation, from phone calls to sending out cards, to gardening and scrubbing and painting. There are all different levels to help. I'm thrilled to say that our minister, Pastor Tom Bozeman, is back in the pulpit today. We are currently streaming our services online. The joys and sorrows portion of our service, however, is private, and we will take a break from streaming during that portion. Other than that, the service will be recorded and will be available for future viewing on Facebook, YouTube, and the church website. Our resident nurse has told us that COVID numbers are down, and so masks are optional. Please let your Facebook and Twitter friends know you are attending worship with hashtag First Unitarian Hobart. And now please silence your devices and take a deep breath and another and join us in the spirit of reverence.
Will you join me now in the lighting of the chalice? The words are printed in your order of service or on the laminated cards in the pew. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
I invite you to open up your hymnals to reading 439, as there's some back and forth to our opening words this morning. I will read the regular text, and I invite you to join me in reading the italics. We gather in reverence before the wonder of life, the wonder of this moment, the wonder of being together, so close yet so apart, each hidden in our own secret chamber, each listening, each trying to speak, yet none fully understanding, none fully understood. We gather in reverence before all intangible things the eyes see not, nor ears can detect, that hands can never touch, that space cannot hold, and time cannot measure. I invite you to turn your hymnals to hymn the wrong number in here. I believe it's 401. I believe it's 401. So the number in here is incorrect. So turn your hymnals to 401. You might recognize the tune, and I invite you to rise in body or spirit. This song, though familiar, is there's a way that it's become overly familiar, and so I invite for this. Kumbaya is a dialectical way of saying "come by here," and so it's an asking, it's a welcoming, it's a beckoning song. So I invite you to join in singing hymn 401.
Please remain standing and join me now in the affirmation of faith. The words are printed on the laminated handouts in your pews and in the order of service. Love is a doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament. service is its prayer, and this is our covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth of love, and to help one another. We are striving to create a worship space which is both spiritual and safe. However, we recognize that not everyone can attend in person. We extend a special welcome to everyone who is joining us virtually today. Thank you to our tech team for making the live streaming and recording possible. For those present in the sanctuary, please take a moment to greet your neighbors, waving your hands and letting the warmth of your smiles fill the spaces.
Each week we share our joys, concerns, milestones with one another, and in sharing them, weave this community tighter and build the bonds between us. So does anybody have any joys or concerns or milestones that you'd like to share with this congregation? Yes. And please say your name when you... So one thing that was mentioned to me by someone in my first few weeks at this congregation was, why isn't that you haven't introduced yourself to the congregation? And I thought that was a splendid idea, so I thought I might do that a little bit more formally. My name is Tom. It's good to meet you all. I grew up Unitarian Universalist, mostly in Connecticut, and as often happens, I drifted away after high school. I felt like I had gotten out of high school and I was able to go to college, and I had a wonderful social life, having gotten out of high school finally. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s and I had gone back to college and I was writing a series of papers for a class that I was in on my intellectual self, my physical self, my emotional self, and my spiritual self. And I got to that last one, the spiritual self, and I thought, what am I going to write? What do I have to say about my spiritual self? And as I sat with it and I struggled with the looming deadline, I realized, I grew up in a church. Maybe that has something to do with my spiritual self. And so I started thinking about my experience of growing up Unitarian Universalist, and I realized that I had conflated, that I'd mixed up the social aspect of growing up UU with the spiritual aspect of growing up UU. And once I realized that my social needs had been met since high school, but spiritually I wasn't being fed in the same way that I had been when I was growing up. And so I made my way back, and I started going to church and youth group and conferences and so on. And I was living in a housing cooperative in Boston at the time. And I was thinking about going to grad school, and one of my housemates said, well, Tom, you seem to be spending a lot of time at church. Have you thought about becoming a minister? And I said, that is ridiculous. That is never going to happen. And so eventually, of course it did. And I've served 4 other congregations in Massachusetts and 1 in Washington at this point. And my ministry, over the course of ministry, it becomes more and more refined of what exactly it is I have to offer, and what my skills and strengths are and what my weaknesses are. And my hope, my intention is to support you all in being the congregation that you are called to be, in living out your mission, in bringing into full flourishing whatever it is that you want to focus on. Because there's more in the world to be done than any individual or any congregation or any group can possibly do. And so whatever it is that you all want to focus on, let's do that together. Let's make it sing. Let me equip you with whatever tools or awareness or being a thought partner and coming up with how we might approach things together. My intention is to be in conversation with you all so that we can build something together. And it's really important that it be where you want to go. In the first church that I served, I decided to lift my banner high on where I wanted to go, and I discovered what it's like when nobody wants to follow along with where you want to go. Because in Unitarian Universalism, the minister doesn't name that thing and run for it and expect everybody to follow after. So I'm looking to you all to say, what can I support you in as an individual, as a congregation, as a committee, as a team, so that we can make those things happen together. So please be in touch by email, by phone, by carrier pigeon, however you'd like to reach out to me. We're getting an administrator in the near future. We're hiring an administrator, and some of the communication around how to communicate and how to be in touch and how to put things into action should get fleshed out in the coming weeks or so. So look for that. But in the meantime, information up on the board in there of how to get in touch with me. So that's a little introduction. And please, if you have questions, I'm happy to chat. So, a story for you all this morning. This is a story from the Middle East, and it is this particular version of it is by Elisa Davy Permain, and it's fairly brief. One night, a neighbor strolling by Nasruddin's house found him outside under the street lamp, brushing through the dust. Have you lost something, my friend? He asked. And Nasruddin explained that he had lost his key and asked the neighbor to help him find it. And after some minutes of searching and turning up nothing, the neighbor asked him, "Are you sure you lost the key here?" And Nasruddin answered, "No, I didn't lose it here. I lost it inside the house." And so his friend said, "If you lost the key in the house, Nasruddin, why are you looking for it out here?" "Well," Nasruddin replied, "there's more light out here, of course." So it's been a couple weeks since we sang hymn 1043, so come on up, Don, to help us do that. So that's in the teal hymnal. If you'll flip to 1043 and rise and body your spirit, we can do a little pronunciation practice again to remind everybody of this. So we've sung this song a couple of weeks, but it's been a little bit, so to refresh folks' memory. So you'll notice on the bottom of the page, there's a pronunciation guide. And so I'm going to read the lines to you, and I'd ask you just to say them back to me just to get the pronunciation there, so when we get to the singing, it makes it flow a little bit easier. So that first part goes, Hal heat ot seretet. Hal heat ot seretet. Hal seretet ot beke. Hal seretet ot beke. Hal beke ot aldash. Hal beke ot aldash. Hal aldash ot ishten. Hal aldash ot ishten. Hal ishten. Hal ishten. Ot suksheg. Ot suksheg. Ninshen. Ninshen. Beautiful. Great.
Yes, and you'll note that the hymn is in two parts. The first time through, everybody sings part one, which is the top line and the translating text. The second verse, we'll all sing part two, which is the second line. And on the third time, the south side of the church will sing the first part, and then the north side will sing the part two. Don will be singing part one for that, the third iteration, and then I will be singing part two. So all the parts will be covered. Here we go, from the top.
Beautiful, beautiful. It's one of the lovely things about learning hymns together is we can hear the progression from week to week. We start to kind of wrap our vocal cords around it, and it flows better and better. I'm going to start off the sermon with a reading. This is a poem called Cordage or Atonement. Call us fishmeal. We are no prophet. We are no prophet. Our whole year swallowed as if by a massive maw. What else could stomach our hearts, huge with hurt, everyone and everything hell-shocked as a sea baiting its breath, its time, as if to hold its whole self. Lasting meant being separate, together, proximate in our distance. To be a part of the living, we had to be apart from it, alive but alone. It was death by survival. The word atone comes from the Middle English meshing of at and one, literally at one or in harmony. By the second half of the 17th century, atone meant to reconcile and thence to suffer the pains of whatever sacrifice is necessary to bring about a reconciliation. There swims our one hope, unintelligible in its massiveness. Like a finback dragging itself under, and harrowed as we are, we're still standing gold as a beach, despite all augury, proof that the meek shall repaireth the earth. Call us Odsis, wily as these miles of bloodshed, our gods owe men omens, answers we mean. We hide a battalion in the body of this poem, wild as a wolf in the woods. Strength as separate from survival. What endures isn't always what escapes, and what is withered can still withstand. We watch men mend their amens, words flapping against their hands. Poetry is its own prayer. The closest words come to will. Come the 10th year in this battle, we will no longer allow shadows of free tenantry inside us. We would leap out of this night, down rushing on our head. Often we cannot change without someone in us dying. Call us an exodus, plagued 10 times over. For all we see is red, intentional language, like a poem, is to separate our waters like a gash, to find the sea also grieving and giving enough to be walked through. No, we are the whale, with a heart so huge it can't help but wail. We can't help but help. If given the choice, we would not be among the chosen, but amidst the changed. Unity is its own devout work, the word we work in, that leaves us devastated to be delivered. The future isn't attained, it is atoned, until it is at one with history, until home is more than memory, until we can hold near who we hold dear. What a marvelous wreck we are. We press out of our cold and separate crouching like a vine sprung overnight. We were reaching and wretched upon this mortal soil, and even so, we are undiminished. If just for this newborn day, let us take back our lives. Cordage or Atonement by Amanda Gorman. So we are in the 4th week of this series, this worship series, where for August and the first little bit of September, we're talking about reflection and self-examination. And then in late September and into October, we'll be talking about setting intentions for the coming year, taking any action to resolve whatever is lingering from this past year. And of course, as I've said in past weeks, in our society, the tendency is to do this sort of thing around New Year's, the end of December, the beginning of January. But in Judaism and some pagan traditions, this is the time of year to do that sort of thing. As it starts to get a little colder, as we are huddling more indoors, as the weather gets a little wetter sometimes, how do we knit our relationships with ourselves and with one another more beautifully? And so the homework that I assigned, that I asked you to do after the first week, was focused on how do you want to be remembered? What is most important? And then in the second week, we got a little bit deeper and talked about how we take stock of our lives. And I offered a series of questions in that stock-taking direction, asking, what do you notice is falling away? What brush needs to be cleared in order for new growth to occur? What suffering do you use or has been distracting you? In what ways have you been dishonest with yourself? Or what tug do you feel just under the surface? And then in the third week, I offered an invitation, since there'd be a few weeks of break, to do some reflection, some sinking of your teeth into what is under the surface in your life. What is it that's calling to you? This week, I'll be talking about taking on a posture of vulnerability in the hope of taking back our lives from whatever it is that's got us. So, it was a few years ago. We're in 2022 now. So it was 21 years ago. I was living in New York City at the time, and I was on my way to work in Hell's Kitchen. I was working at a sound studio back then, and I got off the subway, and I was walking the few blocks to get over there, and I heard somebody yelling something from the top of, there's a short building near work, and I heard somebody yelling something, and I wasn't quite sure what they were talking about. They were talking about being able to see it from the roof. And I got into work, and everybody was huddled around the TV in the kitchen in the sound studio, watching on the news what was happening just a few blocks to the south of where we were, the September 11th attacks. And it was a bizarre experience to be living in New York City at the time, to be part of a conversation that was happening over a much larger span of geography, and to hear, to see, to witness the hay that everybody was making of it in different directions. There was, of course, a grieving. There were memorials all over the place. There was a thirst for vengeance that people were talking about. There were some folks who were using that as an opportunity to talk about the things that the U.S. government has done around the world that maybe should be apologized for, or that there was some kind of retribution for. There was all people taking this conversation in lots of different directions. There was the advice to keep shopping, that was the number one thing that we should do, is to keep shopping to help the economy. But one of the threads woven in a lot of that was, how do we handle the fact that we are vulnerable? How do we handle the fact that we can be harmed? That we are just people moving through the world? To what extent are we willing to accept the fact that we can be harmed? Each of us has had things to happen to us. Maybe some of them have been world historical, like a terrorist attack or a natural disaster. Maybe some of them have been very personal. The acute pain of the death of a dear friend, or the chronic ache of friends and family having moved away. Into each of our lives, there is some tearing, some rending that occurs of what we had come to know and love. And in the face of that, we are left to pick up the pieces, to reweave the fabric of our existence into a new pattern. And if we try to do that alone as an individual, it can be a very brittle thing that we create. Our economy since the 1950s has thrived on convincing us that we all need our own individual lawnmower or bread machine or Stairmaster. But the fiction that we can survive as individuals, that we can survive and thrive, is something that we can let go of. The cataclysm has come and will continue to come. And so what sort of foundation will we craft for ourselves to navigate whatever troubled waters come along? What regular practices of coming back, of mending a shared foundation shall we take on? Kumbaya is a dialectical way, as I was saying, of saying, come by here. Come by here, my Lord, come by here. And the lyrics of Sike Aldash that we've been singing over these past few weeks, where there is faith, there is love. Where there is love, there is peace. Where there is peace, there is blessing. Where there is blessing, there is God. And where there is God, there is no need. Each of these gesture towards the need for something richer and broader than the individual. And we UUs can easily get sidetracked into a theological discussion on the existence or nature of God, on what we believe about how the universe is put together. But if we get sidetracked in that way, we can miss out on some fundamental human grapplings. We'd be looking for that lost key in the place where there is more light, but not actually where we might find it. As the poet David Whyte wrote in his poem Self-Portrait, it doesn't interest me if there is one God or many gods. I want to know if you belong or feel abandoned, if you know despair or can see it in others. I want to know if you are prepared to live the world with its harsh need to change you. If you can look back with firm eyes saying, this is where I stand. I want to know if you know how to melt into that fierce heat of living, falling toward the center of your longing. I want to know if you are willing to live day by day with the consequence of love and the bitter, unwanted passion of your sure defeat. I have been told in that fierce embrace, even the gods speak of God. Or as Rabbi Alan Liu pointed out, regardless of what is real in an essential sense and what is human construction, it is all real and all inescapable. Even though we invented the idea of weeks, we die when our allotted number of weeks have gone by. Whether or not there is a God, we still live in a world in which every second confronts us with a choice between blessings and curses, life and death, a world in which our choices have indelible consequences, a world in which life and death, blessings and curses choose us, seek us, find us in every moment. It makes no difference. What makes a difference is that it's real and it's happening right now and it's happening to us and it is utterly inescapable and we are completely unprepared. This moment is before us with its choices and the consequences of our past choices are before us, as is the possibility of our transformation. This year, some of us will die and some of us will live and all of us will change. So regardless of our beliefs, we are in our lives confronted with the immensity of existence, the ways in which we feel like we have done all we know how to do, and it hasn't felt like it's enough. The ways in which we are left to grapple, to pick up the pieces as best we can, to try to put them back together into some sensible fashion. The tendency in our society is to just lean into more and more and more and more stuff to pay attention to or watch or read or eat. And we're often unpracticed at really just fully encountering, at fully feeling our own lostness, our own unpreparedness, our own vulnerability. In our own vulnerability, there exists such possibility of exploring and experiencing the depth of humanity, the depth of what it means, what it's like to be human. Feeling the rhythm, the pulsing of that life coursing within us. all of the hopes and the dreams and the sorrows and the tears of that. In that place of depth, it becomes possible to let our agendas go, to let go of the things we are grasping really tightly to, and to approach one another unguarded in our own humanness, witnessing the humanness in one another. So my invitation to you, my homework assignment, is over the course of this coming week to see how much you can just get in touch with your own raw humanness. Whatever flavor that's like for you, whatever texture that might be for you, allowing your heart to come to the surface, allowing your soul to relax, allowing a relaxedness to come into your being. And I understand that's a very broad piece of homework. There's lots of different directions and shapes that could take. And so that's part of my hope to engage in this conversation with you all, because the nuance, the way that it shows up for each one of you, will be vastly different from the one sitting next to you or behind you or in front of you. The nuances of you are beyond imagining. When we relax into them, there is so much to discover. And so, to whatever extent you all are able to chat with me about that over the course of this week, I would love to weave some of those pieces into our concluding sermon next week. In an anonymous way, of course. But bringing in how some of that humanness, how some of that vulnerability can show up in you and in this congregation. When we just sit and say, come by here. Somebody's weeping, somebody's laughing, somebody's praying. Come by here. May we find that deeper layer of humanness together. And may it ever be so.
Now is the time in our service for our offering. We give to remind ourselves of how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and friendship. We give with the faith that together we have enough. Money in the baskets goes to sustaining the mission of our community. Money in the cups goes to our Faith in Action ministry and a different charity chosen by the ministry every month. This month, the money from the cups goes to the LGBTQ plus outreach of Porter County. For those that are not with us here today, there's an online link on the screen for both one-time and regular donations. And if we could have, I think maybe one more volunteer, 4 volunteers, please. for your prayers, your presence, your service, and your gifts. We are truly grateful. And now please rise as you are willing and able and join in singing the closing hymn, 396 in the gray hymnal.
We'll sing this through 3 times together in unison.
Our closing words this morning from Wayne Arneson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. May that also ever be so.
Join with me again, please, as we extinguish the chalice. The words, again, are printed in your order of service and on the laminated cards. We extinguish this flame, but not the light